Hello and welcome. In the spirit of my brand new book, The Delicate Art of Transformation, I've been on a quest for truth. What does it actually take to create real, lasting transformation? And here you are on the precipice of something big. I don't think that's a coincidence that we should ignore. Welcome, my friend. Welcome to the True Transformation Summit. This is where true growth and transformation happens. When the right person says the right thing at the right time and it all clicks, those are the moments that make all the difference. And that is what this summit is here for. You're going to hear from some incredible experts who every single one I personally invited to be here. So listen with an open heart, do what they say, take what resonates, try the practices, get their free gifts, and let this space be the place where you find your next step. My name is Talia Joy. I'm your host. And if you want all the free gifts, the resources, and the only place where you can be entered for prizes, you can join the Insider Circle for free below. All right, without further ado, take a deep breath in. Think about what you are transforming, what you are here for. And let's dive into today's episode. Hello, Ben. Welcome to the True Transformation Summit. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing really well, thanks, Talia. Thanks so much for having me here. It's really good to be here.
This is going to be such a good conversation, and I appreciate it so much. I asked you to come back on the show. You've been on the show before, and your grounded energy, the way you teach, I feel like you make these big concepts be really relatable. There's just something in that I love to learn from you. I love to hear you speak about this stuff. So I am really honored that you're here today to help us with that. I love how you address the mindset, but you make it also tangible and practical. So I'm really excited. We're going to talk about identity and expanding our identity. So thank you again for being here. It's going to be so good.
I'm looking forward to it. It's exciting.
Yeah.
What a great space to be on.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Everyone listening's really ready. Like we're on that growth edge. We're ready to take action. We're listening. So it's going to be really good to dive in. So let's just start at the beginning. If there are people that are new to your world, let us know a little bit about who you are and the work that you do.
Yeah, so just a brief intro into me. I was born in Sydney, Australia for about the first 20 or so years, 25 years of my life. I struggled with heavy depression, anxiety, a lot of overwhelm, and I kind of dove into substance abuse, and it was a really heavy period of my life. And when I found self-development, there was this kind of like short period of like, oh my gosh, there is so much that is out there that I didn't know, and there's so much waiting for me to discover. And there was this kind of like period in between where I was still kind of like, I can change, and yet I was not changing. And that kind of is something that stood with me, that kind of stuck with me, this kind of feeling of like knowing that there's something more for you, knowing that there's something else, that like we've been conditioned and we have, the social pressures and the upbringing and the, whatever schooling and the parents that you had growing up and all the, society expectations. And there's a lot that a lot of people, for myself, a lot that I went through and had to overcome and understand about my world. But it was this kind of period where I realized that I was conditioned. I realized that I wanted to get to know myself more and break, free of these patterns, but I still didn't quite know how. And that's really the type of person that, I want to be speaking to and I'm calling into, because I know how frustrating it is to just kind of like want, that transformation and really like be like, I'm reading the books and I'm listening to the podcasts and whatever. And it's like, why am I still stuck in my head? Why is that inner critic still like knocking me down? Why am I still repeating those same people-pleasing patterns and, doing the same things over and over again? And I think possibly what's so frustrating about it is that now you can see it, now that like you're aware of it. And that was for me, I was like, I'm more aware than I've ever been. And yet I'm still repeating these same damn, conditioned patterns over and over again. And that's really like what I want to help people to break out of, because there's so much out there for each and every one of you that like it's exciting when you get to just reconnect with yourself and get to learn yourself outside of who they've told you to be and who you've learned you needed to be and all the things that like make other people happy and comfortable and whatever else and just, refinding who you are. So that's kind of, me in a nutshell and the type of person that I help and I'm, there's just this type of things that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. And I know everybody listening is like, yes, even to the point where like your promise that through self growth, we're going to reach this, promised land, this mecca, this euphoria or whatever life's supposed to be great. And I'm aware I have this wound. I'm aware I'm, procrastinating here or shutting down there. And it's that trap of almost, that crippling self awareness. I know that I can do more or that there's more for me and I'm hungry for it. Why isn't it working? And so I love that we're talking about that because speaking of what we're going to talk about, that's a gap, right? That's a gap from knowing into being, knowing into shifting that energy into somebody who shows up different. And that is, a lot of that is where it can get really sticky. So let's start to talk about identity. I'm curious how you became aware of that, your own identity, what that means to you, all of it. Let's dive in.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head where you said like there's a gap there because something that I feel is kind of the defining point for growth, for transformation, for just how we experience life is that there's these gap pockets in our life. And a lot of times people are thinking like, oh, I just need more time with this, or I need more, practice, whatever. It's like, yes, maybe time, that could be the gap, or practice could be the gap. But there are also times where you have an awareness, you have an aha moment, and you've bridged that gap in a second, right? And so there's these different gaps that happen throughout our kind of journey. Sometimes it can be like if you've gone through a bad relationship, it could be this like year-long gap that you've had to like go through, and then all of a sudden something clicks and you're like, okay,
Mhm.
I can move on because you needed to bridge that gap in order to kind of progress, grow past that, and to move forward. And so I think for a lot of a lot of the type of person that we want to be, the type of person that we can kind of feel inside, but we're still a bit too scared to bring out to the surface and show the world really who we are because, well, there's a gap also in understanding who we are in and of ourselves. And so there's this kind of like awareness gap. Well, let me structure it first like this. I'll tell you first these kind of three gaps that I like, and I'll lead into it, and then we'll kind of dive into it. First, we have what I call the awareness gap, which is essentially this idea that you don't know what you don't know, right? And I think for myself, a lot of the times that I was going through self-development and I was becoming more aware and I was, going through my awakening and I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. But I didn't know all the things that I didn't know I still needed to know. And so there's this kind of gap in who I thought I was, what I thought the world was, what I thought my beliefs were, or my conditioning were, or my patterns were. But then there was this massive gap, this kind of blind spot of all the things that I didn't know. So there's this kind of awareness gap that needs to be bridged in order to kind of understand ourselves more. And then the next is, this strategy gap. And I kind of, it's funny, last week there was this perfect example. I was out rock climbing and there was this one kind of wall that I was trying to go. I was probably on it for like 20 minutes, close to half an hour, and I was trying over and over again. And I felt like I just needed to do it harder. I just needed to do, be better at what I was doing. And just, if I could just hold on tighter, if I could just, really push through. And I kept going, kept trying and kept trying. And after about 20 minutes, someone, next to me said, well, what if you kind of put your hand up here and you put your leg down there and you try it this way and you do something different? And as soon as that kind of clicked, as soon as I had a different technique and a different strategy for it, I did it the very next turn. Because often it's not necessarily about how hard you're trying to, grow or how hard how much effort you're putting into this. Because I know for a lot of people, it's like, I'm just trying so hard to be better. I'm trying so hard to just like be out of my mind or to stop the feelings coming up or to, quiet that inner critic. And often it's not about how hard you're trying, but whether or not you've got the right strategy for actually moving forward. And so we've got that kind of strategy gap. And then lastly, we've got our essentially our identity gap, which is the person that you believe you are now. We'll say person A, this is who you currently have learnt to see yourself. And person B, the type of person who you can kind of feel inside, you've started to see inside, you know there is someone else there, but you don't necessarily identify with that person yet. And so there is this gap between who you've been taught to see when you look in the mirror and who you actually are inside. And I think, when we understand how to bridge those gaps, then we can start to move towards being that person B, which is essentially, the person the person that we are inside the whole time. We've just constantly looked out from day one. We've looked outwards as to try and understand who we are by looking at who people, in the external world are and how things work and whatever outside of ourselves, that we haven't necessarily learnt how to look inside to understand, okay, well, who am I actually? And so when we learn and understand how to bridge our awareness gap, and we can kind of bridge that distance between what we've learnt to see, what we've learnt, what we think is out there and how we think the world is and how we think we are. And we bridge that awareness gap to who we actually are. We bridge the strategy that allows us to kind of get there and make those changes. Well, then naturally, as a byproduct, we start becoming more like the person that we see inside rather than staying with this kind of facade that we've been taught to see in the mirror. We've been taught to show up as. We've been feeling like we're expected to show up as. And so I think it's really kind of understanding that this is all about bridging gaps. This is all about, finding those areas within our journey that can bridge those gaps so that we can start to feel more comfortable with the type of person that we are, rather than more comfortable and more familiar with the type of person we've been expected to show up as.
Oh, there's so much in there. I want to go back and rewind that. You guys probably want to go re-listen. That was so powerful. First of all, thank you. And I love how you're touching on these three gaps. And I was thinking about when you're talking about the strategy and how, universally and spiritually and magically, this is how sometimes doors just open because we pivoted just a little bit. Like you said, with the rock thing, the rock climbing. And I've had that in my business where I'm like, nothing's working and nobody's buying. And then I have this idea, I do this thing, and all of a sudden 10 people buy. And I'm like, oh, it wasn't that no one was out there, is that there wasn't that clear channel or the whatever it was, there wasn't that click. And that things can come about when we realign with a new energy and kind of get that, a different perspective or something, which is just really powerful. I was curious as you're talking about this, I feel like some people, when you say looking inside and we're talking about identity, to discover who you truly are versus who you've been, conditioned to be. I know you like to talk about conditioning as well. But I think sometimes we're trying to achieve something. We've got this transformation going on, this butterfly version of us that we see on the other side. And bridging that gap in identity to that person as well. So sometimes we have goals of wealth. Well, who is the identity of you that's more wealthy? But you're also talking about the identity of who you truly are. So I almost want to mesh those two. Is who you truly are also your highest self, your next version? And how do you, look at that?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think, the two are very, very close to one and of the same, because we have that potential within us. And I think, this idea of potential it's something that is also future. It's the potential to be, this type of person. But if we have that potential within us, well, we have the potential to be that now. And I think, often when we have these ideas of like, especially when we're thinking about manifesting and bringing things into our life, we want to start living as if that's already, a part of our life. We want to start bringing that into our life as though we're already living from that space, living from that energy. We're already grateful that we're part of that life, And so I think with this idea of like our highest self, our most empowered self, that there is nothing stopping us from imagining, envisioning that type of person and bringing their wisdom into, who we are at the moment. And so one of the things that I really like to ask is say, if you were to have a conversation with your most empowered self, and they were right next to you, what kind of things, and they were going through the exact same scenario that you're going through, the same patterns, the same loops, that they're getting the same judgment from other people, how would they be reacting differently? What would their inner talk be like? Their self-talk be like? How would they be responding to themselves? How would they be, allowing themselves to feel? Would they be trying to shut it down? Would they be trying to distract themselves from how they feel? Would they be trying to run away from their feelings, or would they be allowing themselves to feel? Will they be, seeing themselves for what they're going through and being like, yeah, this is some tough shit right now, but you know what? I've got this and I'm going to get through this. And so I think there's a lot of, beauty and power being able to kind of sit side by side with that version of ourselves and bring their knowledge, their wisdom, their advice into our life at the moment.
I love that. It's really like blending the two. It becomes nuanced. And I was just kind of, hit with, as I'm listening to you speak, that sometimes, we don't know who we are. That was kind of what was coming up last time when you were mentioning it, is I think there's some people that go like, be who I truly am. I've almost been a people pleaser, as you said, or whatever else my entire life. I don't know who I am. And that might even feel a little bit intimidating, but it might feel more comfortable to kind of go for that next level self, or as you said, most empowered self. I love that. So depending on where you're coming from, you can kind of look at what would my most empowered self do. But I find for myself, over time, my best self, quote unquote, has changed. It used to be more about what she was doing that was flashy, or what she was buying, and now it's this different. It's about boundaries. It's about not abandoning myself. It's about a true confidence and an unfuckable withness. And so it's neat to kind of have this conversation that is who you truly are. But you might also find, as you look at it as your most authentic self or your most empowered self, that it might change. Who knows? So yeah, curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the thing with, self-identity, how we perceive ourselves, it's exactly that. It's the perception that we have of ourselves. And so, this can change depending on how we want to see ourselves. And I think this is really powerful because we have this isn't something that's taught in school, and this isn't something that we're brought up understanding. It's just kind of like, oh, you are this person, or you should do this. You need to be that. But rather it's, well, who do I want to be in this moment? And maybe next moment I want to be someone else. And that is still totally allowed. And that's totally, your entitlement to be whoever you want to be. And I think what's really important here is recognizing that your sense of identity comes from an inner place of what feels right for you in and of that moment. And so the way that I kind of like to see this, sense of identity, how we perceive ourselves, is kind of, I kind of look at it in these three kind of manners. So we've got the more kind of mental, internal vision of how we perceive ourselves, the beliefs that we have, the morals and values that we have, the opinions that we have, how we kind of see, and view ourselves and other people around us or the world around us. And then we have our relationship with our emotions. And that's, very much on, do I perceive myself as an angry person, an overwhelmed person, a people pleaser, this morning person? Like, how am I relating? Am I quick, what's the word? Like quick heated, quick,
Like hot-headed, sort of.
hot-headed. Thank you.
That kind of.
Yeah, totally. And so it's this kind of relationship that we have with our emotions that is a big part of how we identify with ourselves. And then we also have the type of actions that we take or the type of actions that we don't take. And that is also how we identify ourselves. Are we an entrepreneur? Are we, like a people pleaser? Are we a procrastinator? Are we a morning person? Are we like a runner or an athlete, or like all these types of things are part of how we self-identify. And so when we kind of break this down, then we can kind of look at, and this is something that I go into more depth in the 7-day course that I'm launching next month, which I'm super excited about. But essentially, there's these 3 pillars which essentially go into detail on this. You have your inner ownership, which essentially breaks down the like, who am I in my head? How do I view myself? What are my beliefs? Do I have ownership over who I am and how I perceive myself in the world? Or am I being kind of owned and authored by the beliefs of other people, of what they think is right or wrong, what they think is good or bad? Right? And then we have emotional legitimacy. Am I legitimizing how I feel? Am I allowing myself to feel what I feel? Are my feelings allowed to feel okay and right, even if they're difficult, even if they're uncomfortable, even if they're shitty and heavy? Are they still allowed to be okay with me as a person? Or are we stuck in this kind of, if I feel anxious, I must be a bad person. Or if I feel guilty, I've obviously done something wrong, it's because I'm not good enough. So there's these kind of identity attachments that we have with feeling, whereas when we legitimize how we feel, we allow ourselves to feel what we're feeling and be like, yeah, listen, it's okay that I'm feeling this. That doesn't make me a bad person, and it doesn't make me unworthy of, all these things. I can still feel this and still be, a beautiful human being and trying my best and doing, what I can. And then we have aligned action, which is essentially, as the name sounds, is my action doing something to try and control an outcome? Is my action trying to make other people happy, pleased, comfortable? Am I trying to, manage other people's emotions and responses? Or am I doing something that feels aligned for me? Regardless of whether, it's a favorable or unfavorable outcome, am I doing something that I feel like in the moment feels true and right for me? And I think that when we start to connect with these 3 pillars, we start to recognize, and this is, when you're asking, like, how do we know who we are? And I think a lot of the time, we can understand there's a feeling inside that we can know who we're not. And from that, we can kind of start to break away these, ideas, how we see the world, how we see ourselves. If we're perceiving a specific event and like, I would never say that to a friend. But if you say that to yourself, well, then there's some kind of dissonance there. There's some kind of disconnect there. So I think we do have a clear understanding of, the values that we hold true. It's just often we're not good at holding those own values for ourselves. And that's where that kind of, boundaries that get broken. Because there's certain things that we would never say to the people we love. There's certain things that if they wanted to go out and, try to create the life that they want, or the business that they want, or, go out and learn something crazy, you would want to like support them, regardless of how many times they screw up and how many times they, try and it doesn't work, and they try again and it doesn't work and they try again. You want to be that person that supports them. And so I think often when we kind of push this and move outside of ourselves, we can see we have a very clear understanding of who we are and the morals and values that we hold. We have a very clear understanding of what emotions are, like allowed to be felt. If a good friend or someone who you loved felt, anxious or uncertain of themselves or angry or frustrated, would you be there to support them? Would you there to be like, hey, listen, like, it's okay, you've got this. Just because you're feeling anxious or you're upset or overwhelmed, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. That doesn't mean that you don't deserve love. That doesn't mean you don't deserve, all the beauty of the universe. And so I think, we're like able to very clearly see what type of person we are and what's important for us. The trick then comes to bringing it back into ourselves, being like, well, if other people deserve this, then the work comes to, well, how can I bring that back to myself? How can I start, looking inwards and being like, this is actually what I believe, and this is actually what I feel is true and right for me. I want to start living by this. I want to start taking action that aligns with that, even if it, means someone gets hurt or someone's disappointed or someone's upset because of it. And I can be there to support them through it. And I can be like, hey, listen, I had to put up my boundary and I hear you. That sucks for you. And like, I feel for you, but it's still a no. And we can say that with love and we can say that with compassion and we can say that with all the support in the world. And however they take that no, that's on them. We can support all that comes up for them while still honoring and respecting yourself. And so when we start to rebuild these three pillars, then we can start to bridge that gap to the person that we truly are, the person that we want to be, and also the person that, like we said before, that we bring in from 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line, and the type of life that we want to be living, the type of person that we inspire to be. Because I think often we have the opportunity to be our own like greatest inspiration. If we were to think of the most inspiring, most, incredible person, there's no reason that can't be a future self of ours. And if that can be a future self of ours, there's no reason we can't bring that into the potential that we have within us at the moment to bring that up in who we are in this moment. It's not easy. I hear that. I know that was a lot, and it's like, oh yeah, you just kind of bring him in and do all this, and it's it's not easy, but it's doable, and I think that's the big message that I want to get across, that it's it is possible and it is available.
And everyone listening, like this is the place that we are in, and we're ready for that, and you're ready for that, and you're already going through it. This shifting of the identity and the transformation. I love everything that you said, and something that was almost like a through line when you were talking, as I was really hearing, if we're to talk about identity, people may have heard it like, I need to change my identity. I need to become a this person. I need to become a that person. How do I change my identity? But you're sharing it in a way that when we internally act, become more authentic and empowered and real with ourselves. This doesn't feel good. This does feel good. When we do that, our identity then shifts as a byproduct. And I feel like that's important to understand. It's kind of like the be, do, have. We don't just set out, okay, tomorrow I'm changing my identity. And from Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm going to practice these identity shifting techniques. I'm sure they exist, but it would still come from something deeper. We need to act in that empowerment, like you said, knowing ourselves, what feels right, what we feel pulled toward, what doesn't feel right, as you said, what we don't want, what has had a no feeling. At this point, everyone listening, you guys have strong yeses and nos and dynamics that drain you and dynamics that energize you. So I love that you're sharing that it's like, as we act from that place, then our identity starts to shift. We become somebody who starts to be able to say no or have those boundaries. I know a giant shift for me has been not shaming myself. I don't really know the moment it happened, but it was like a moment. And it just all of a sudden shifted into, it doesn't matter what I do or don't do. Someone hires me or not, great day, bad day. I ate this, I didn't eat that. Like, it does not matter. I will not shame myself. And that became a hard line. Practicing that became now the new identity of, I am someone who no longer shames myself and turns against myself. That came from inside. I practiced it, and then the identity got to sort of land. Curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think, when we also consider this type of person that we want to be, even if it's, with your example on that, that's an amazing example, because we can think about like, I want to be the type of person who doesn't shame myself. Okay, so if we, wind that back, then it's like, well, what does this person look like? What kind of, actions does this person take? And I think, well, I guess the type of person who doesn't shame themselves would be more compassionate for themselves if they do something that doesn't come out how they wanted, or if, they really wanted to, snack on that thing, which they, like might not be the healthiest thing, but like whatever, like they did it. Or maybe they, want to reach out to 15 people and they ended up reaching out to 10 people, but that was okay. And the type of person who doesn't shame themselves would be more easy on themselves, or more compassionate, more lenient, more patient with themselves. And so you can kind of work backwards and be like, okay, so, well, this is the type of, attributes that I want to start to take. This is the type of, actions that I want to start to take. And it's the same, for classic people pleasing. It's like, well, what does a not people pleaser do? If I don't want to be a people pleaser anymore, what are some of the things that I need to start doing? And simple things can just be like, I'm just going to start to practice saying no and work from there. Regardless of what comes up, I'm going to allow myself to feel uncomfortable. I'm going to be with it. I'm going to, do my apologies if I'm going to apologize. I'm going to whatever, but I'm going to stick with it. I'm just going to say no, and I'm going to start there, because I know that the non-people pleaser is able to say no when it's not right for them, when they don't feel like they have the energy, when they don't, and we talk so much about like feeling the energy, or if you're not too tired, even if you just don't want to, that is also okay. To not want to do something in that moment, you're allowed to not want to do something and not need to do it. And obviously, the scale is a lot broader than that. We can't necessarily, we don't want to say if you're a parent, well, I just don't want to feed my kids. There are boundaries, but a lot of times when a friend's asking, I was like, I should say yes. This kind of should word of like, I should do this because that's what a good person does. I was like, well, if you're trying to come out of this identity of being a people pleaser, I think the first thing is stop calling yourself a people pleaser, because it's very hard to come out of an identity when you keep yourself in that by calling yourself that. So you can say, I was a people pleaser, or just take it out and just say, you know what, I'm now practicing my boundaries. I'm now, practicing saying no. And now actually, rather than, well, good people say yes, or good people, I should do this. What about people who respect themselves? How do you feel about those types of people? How do you feel about the people that honor themselves? Does that hold weight, for these types of people that, like feel that they are worthy and deserving of being like, not today? Because often when we have other people do that to us, we think, oh, well, that's really cool. They, like respect. Like, that I'm really, honored that you can be truthful with me. You can be, honest with me and vulnerable with me and say it's not working for you. Or tell me, you're not liking something, or you're just saying you don't have the energy, you can't, maybe next week. A lot of people respect that in other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, bringing that back into ourselves of, okay, so if I can respect that in other people, can I start respecting that in myself? Can I start seeing that as actually, maybe this is what the good type of person that I want to strive to be is like, is someone that looks at myself and says, yeah, I want to be honest and truthful to the people I love because they deserve that. They deserve, to see the full me and all of me and all my flaws and whatever. They deserve that just as much as I want to see them. And I want to see their truth. And I don't want them to lie to me. And I don't want them to say yes when I ask for help and then resent me for it. I want them to be honest with me as well, because I feel like I deserve that from them. And I think it works both ways. And so when we start to bring these types of new ideas into our kind of understanding about the type of person we want to be, then we can start to bridge the gap and the gaps. Because I think for a lot of people, they've just never sat down and thought about, what does it mean for me to be a good person, or what does it mean for me to do the right thing, or where do these ideas and concepts come from? It's just a feeling of like, oh no, that feels wrong. That feels off. That feels, I feel guilty, so it must be wrong. Rather than really sitting with that and being like, okay, well, where is this coming from? And are we allowed to possibly tell ourselves something else that feels true and right for you. Not, I don't care if it feels true or doesn't feel true for someone else. If it feels true and right for you, that's what we want to be building, and that's what we want to be, bridging this kind of feeling of like, yeah, you know what? I have my own truth. I have my own experience and reality of life, and I'm actually allowed to experience it the way that feels right for me and feels aligned with me and feels true for me.
Absolutely. And there's something so freeing when you just tell the truth. Like, even if it's a big get together and everyone's going, and it's like, that's the only day I have to myself, and I really don't want to go. And you muster it up and go, like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to come on Sunday. And they go, oh, okay, well, we'll miss you. And you walk away from that thing, or on Sunday, that feeling I get of like, yeah, I did it. And it could be that simple of a thing that normally I'd say, yeah, but I really, and then it feels so good. And when we be who we truly are, and we're brave enough to state that, to say yes, to say no, to go after the thing, even if nobody understands what you're doing, there brings almost like a internal liberation and freedom of like, okay, I did the thing, and like the whole world didn't collapse. Everyone doesn't hate me. Not that, that's the determiner anyway, but we realize like, oh, actually, I feel a lot better doing that. And that does start to compound, makes you more confident next time, makes you able to say no better next time, or easier. And that truly shifts the identity as you're speaking. So, oh, that's so powerful. And I thank you so much for this whole conversation. As we start to wrap up, is there anything unsaid? Is there anything else you want to say around this personal transformation and expanding our identity and the identity piece as we go through this journey?
Yeah, I'll just kind of leave it with this, because I think one of the biggest things that comes up so often with the people that I work with is this feeling of trying to, and we touched on it a bit before, trying to control this outcome, trying to be a certain person and act in a certain way to reach the specific outcomes, because we don't want the people that we love to be disappointed or let down. We want people to feel happy and to let us in, and to have this kind of acceptance and love. So we try to act in ways, or we've been conditioned to act in ways to kind of moderate the feelings, expectations, and responses from other people. And I would love to offer this idea of, rather than focusing on, well, who am I trying to be, and what am I trying to do? What am I trying to say? What kind of response or reaction or outcome is this going to get me? And kind of shift it back to, is what I'm thinking about, is what I'm feeling, is what I'm wanting to do, feeling good and right for me, regardless of what the outcome is. Because over time, as you move more towards the type of person that is yelling inside to come out and be seen and be heard and feel loved and accepted by you, then life around you, your external life around you, will align. And the life around you will kind of fold into the type of life that you're ultimately wanting to create. But that is, again, that is a byproduct of what happens when you just live your life as who you are. And so bring in that kind of that love and that sense of belonging and that sense of wanting to feel seen and wanting to feel accepted to that feeling, that inner child, that inner embodiment within you, so that you can have that as kind of your measurement of growth or your measurement of success. Am I doing this for me, rather than what do I need to do to get XYZ outcome? And if I don't get that outcome, well, I didn't do something good enough, or I wasn't good enough. So yeah, leave it with there.
That's very
That's all.
powerful. Thank you so much. This has been such a good conversation. I feel all like pepped up and ready to go. I'm like, yeah, let's take on the day. I love this. Thank you so much for just the work you do, for sharing your expertise, your time today. And you have a free gift for everybody, you guys. You got to listen to this. So what are you giving away, Ben?
Yeah, so I'm really excited. I've got a 7-day course coming out next month, the end of next month, and just to kind of celebrate the launch of this course to celebrate this space and everything that we've kind of been working on within here. I'd really love to gift whoever's on here, any of your listeners who want to be here, a chance to grab this course completely free of charge. Just speak to me in Facebook or Instagram. Let me know that you've listened to this episode, because and this just a kind of quick briefing on this course. This is called Recondition Yourself, and this is just a really beautiful guided kind of 7-day course that touches into the 3 pillars that we were speaking about. It really guides us through what I call the awareness loop method, which helps to bridge that awareness gap. It completely provides you these trainings and journaling prompts and a beautiful Facebook community to kind of give you the right strategy so you can bridge that strategy gap. And then, to have that kind of support and that guidance through as you start to reconnect to who you are and the type of person that you want to be, so you can bridge essentially that identity gap. And it's such an honor to be able to give that and celebrate the launch of this with you all. Hit me up in the Facebook. Let me know that you listen to this, and it'd be an honor to share this with you.
Thank you so much, Ben. That's so generous. And that sounds like such a powerful course. I like the 7-day as well, because we break it down, bite-sized practices and awarenesses. And I love that you're giving that away to us. We are very lucky, you guys. So thank you so much, Ben. And I'll put all the information below. If you're part of the Insider Circle, it's already in your inbox. And you're also contributing to the prize draw this week. So let us know what one person is winning.
So one person I'm super happy to gift for whoever wins this, a 90-minute breakthrough mapping session with me, where we'll just kind of deep dive for 90 minutes into your loops, into your conditioning, really kind of unravel and reveal some of the deeper kind of multi-layered blocks that might be there. One of the things that this session is just like really beautiful for is helping to bridge that kind of, again, here with the bridging the gap, bridge that gap between, why you're still stuck and what you may have been trying to do and what hasn't really been working, and really helping you find that flow so that you can start to take further steps and move forward as you continue to break free of your conditioning and step into the type of person and the type of life that you want to build for yourself.
Thank you so much. That is valuable. We appreciate it. The lucky winner appreciates it. Thank you so much, Ben. And if somebody does want to follow along, maybe book one of those sessions for themselves or just find you on social media, where do you hang out and where can people find you?
Pretty much mostly on Facebook. Hit me up there, send a message. I'd love to just chat, see where you're at, see what you've been going through. Even if there's just like a question or clarification from this episode, message me. I would love to chat.
Awesome. Thank you again so much, Ben. This was so powerful and just such a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the True Transformation Summit. Make sure to take what this guest said, implement it into your life, check the show notes for their gift and to follow along on the journey, and make sure to tune in to the next guest episode. Namaste.